Hello there, everyone. This is Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and welcome back to the Mad Science Lab podcast. Today, we are continuing on with the My Tier series. Had to double check. We are doing best ball tight ends today with Dennis Michelson. Dennis, thanks for joining me. How's it going?
Oh, it's going fantastic. Always great talking fantasy football with you, Aaron.
I'm not going to lie, everyone has been avoiding the tight end section like the plague, which is funny because I've had the most fun doing these with tight ends and quarterback. Running back, wide receiver, it's like great, good, average, great, good, average. It's just the top 36 wide receivers, they're still pretty good. Whereas you get tight end 24, it's pretty ugly. So I find
Yeah,
these are much more enjoyable to do.
yeah. When it comes to tight ends, you've got them in three tiers, really. Three big buckets, I should say, not tiers. You got this. You got your elite tight ends. Then you got your touchdown dependent tight ends. And then you got your upside prayer tight ends. I mean, it's there's so many of these guys that you just don't know when it's going to be the magical year that they all of a sudden put it all together.
I agree. I think I broke it down a little differently. We have elite, great, good, average, below average, and bad. For those of you who can't see it, Tier Maker doesn't let me change the font, so it's a bit of a pain in the ass, but that's what it is. Guess we can start off with Mark Andrews. Where do you think he goes, and what are your thoughts?
He is in the elite tier for me. He had a little bit of a down year last year, but that was compared to other years that were really, really good. So he's one of those guys that on his team, he probably will again be the primary target in the passing game. And the only two guys you can really say that about are him and Travis Kelsey. And that's
Yeah.
why Andrews is up at that higher tier. Now, the only thing I don't like about Andrews is they did add a bunch of help at wide receiver this year. And in the past, they have not been a high volume passing game. So those are the two things that get me a little bit concerned about Andrews. But it looks like on his ADP, that's getting priced in for you.
Yeah, it's not much of a dip, but I'm buying Andrews. I am not buying into this wide receiving core nearly as much as everyone else. I like Zay Flowers. I like Bateman. I don't think they're an alpha. Not sure if OBJ has anything left. Give me lots of Andrews. I am going to skip ahead here by to the middle and get this one right out of the way. Travis Kelsey. I assume you're fine with him in the elite, and we can move on.
Yeah, he's a super elite. If you look at the difference between Kelsey and the field at tight end, it's greater than the difference between the WR1 and WR5 or even WR10 in some cases, depending on how you evaluate players. And he's the safest bet. The only concern about Kelsey is his age, but I think he's just one of those freaks that is never going to get old until he just all of a sudden falls off the cliff.
Yeah.
And he actually saw an increase in his fantasy football weekly
Yeah.
value last year.
Yeah, I don't care his age. He's one who can die on my roster, but this is best ball, so not dynasty. So I don't care about his age. I am taking him first. Next
Yeah.
up, we have Greg Dulcich.
Greg Dulcich is a really interesting character. Boy, oh boy, he's certainly not in the first two tiers.
No,
He's in my bucket that this guy's got great potential, and I love the coaching change because I think that Sean Payton brings the best out in his players, especially in fantasy football. For the tight end position, I think we've seen some of these big body guys. Now, years ago, a couple of them were more wide receiver eligible than tight end, but we've seen him use the big targets really well. So Dulcich is in my, he's in my, I want him at price type of guys because right now, I mean, you're getting him 12th round. in best ball drafts. He's a gift that late in the draft because my theory is very simple, Aaron, when it comes to best ball drafts. If I don't get an elite tight end, I want three very good possibilities. And Dulcich is one of my guys that if I miss on a Kelsey or an Andrews, Dulcich is a guy I'm going to be taking. So I'd have him maybe in that third tier from the top.
Good. Okay. All righty. Evan Engram. What about him?
Boy, Evan Ingram is a real interesting case because he had a good season last year or appeared to, but he had some games where he just disappeared. Now, in best ball, you don't care about that as much. In best ball, I just want guys that are going to be able to post that big score. I'd have him in that good range with Dulcich because I do think we're going to see a little bit of climb. You saw Calvin Ridley get added to that wide receiver core there, and they also added more talent at the running back position. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that takes away a few of the targets from Ingram, and they also added a rookie tight end in the draft. I don't know if he's going to be a huge factor, but Ingram, I would downgrade him a little bit going into this year. Still a guy that I'm going to take at value because he's going in the 8th round plus in most best ball drafts. Now, a lot of these tight ends get really crazy because you'll see them have a wider variance of where they go depending on where you're drafting. If you're in an FPPC league versus underdog, the
Yeah.
APs could be vastly different. And I
For
think,
sure.
Ingram's going to be one of those guys that's like that. But once they get past the 8th, ninth round, Ingram's on the board, and I don't have a good tight end yet, or I just have one good tight end and not an elite guy, I'm starting to look for Ingram.
Zach Ertz.
Zach Ertz, I would drop down one tier below those guys. And the reason is he's getting older and he's starting to slow down. And Trey McBride is coming on as a guy that I think will get more usage. Plus, I'm a little bit worried about this Cardinals offense being a little bit of a train wreck,
Yeah.
especially early in the season if Kyler Murray misses more than a few games.
Absolutely. I think that's a very distinct possibility. Gerald Everett.
Gerald Everett is a guy that I put one tier below. He had some big games, but I'd put him a tier below Ertz right now. I do not like Gerald Everett this year at all.
Oh, that's surprising. I was in on him for with Kellen Moore coming over, but maybe that's just me. Patty Fryermuth.
Fryermuth is a guy that I love in dynasty format because I think this guy is going to become a better and better player with time. I love the move of getting Darnell Washington on that team because he can play the real tight end role, and Freiermuth can be kind of freed up. So I put him in the Dulcich group right here. But there's such upside to Freiermuth especially in tight end premium. If you're in a tight end premium best ball league, I've seen some of those out there. He's a guy that's going to grade a little bit higher because he is going to be able to get more targets. Quarterback issues. Does Pickett get better? That's one of the things
Yeah.
holding Muth back right now. Talented player.
Mike Gesicki, newly added to the Patriots.
Gesicki is one of the tougher to read players. Going into last year, my weekly value tool, which combines big game ability and consistency, loved Gesicki, but I hated him with the change of offense over there and the addition of Tyreek Hill. And I guessed right on that with Gesicki. And I was in Gesicki avoidance mode last year. So I'd have him in third from the bottom.
Okay.
Now,
Dallas.
the one thing I
Sorry.
will say about Gesicki though is watch the early parts of that season and see what in the preseason and see what he's doing. I may change my mind on him as I see how this offense is going to unfold in preseason.
Next up, we have Dallas Goddard.
Dallas Goddard is a guy that I really liked in the past, but I'm going to put him in the Dulcich group right now. And the main thing is, if you look at the stats on Goddard when it comes to big games in fantasy football, with the addition of AJ Brown, his weekly value went down considerably last year. So that kind of prevents him from having any more upward mobility, but he's another guy that he can post a big game at any time.
Yeah, kind of caps his ceiling for sure.
Yep.
Tyler Higbee.
Higby is another guy that I'm really not crazy about, so I'm going to drop him down in the Everett group, mainly because I'm just unsure about what that Rams offense is going to be able to do this year.
So you're not a fan of LA tight ends, is what I've
I am
determined here.
I am in LA tight end avoidance mode, which is actually kind of surprising because last year I was pretty heavy on Everett. Did he pay off in best balls? Sort of. He really underperformed in my opinion.
TJ Hawkinson.
Hawkinson is a guy that I absolutely love, but not as much as Andrews and Kelsey. So I'd put him in one tier below those guys. But Hawkinson is so close to moving into that elite group. He's just a little overpriced for me, though. He's going
Yeah.
in the fourth round. And, if I don't get an elite guy, I'm probably fading tight ends and I'm probably going with more of those guys. Now, if he drops to the fifth or sixth round in a weird situation with the draft, then I'm looking at him a little closer each round he drops. Fourth is a little pricey, but I'd still take that investment if I was strong elsewhere at that point in the draft.
Juwan Johnson.
Jawan Johnson is an interesting case. That guy is a perfect prototype best ball tight end versus redraft. Try to guess in redraft when he's going to have a bad week. It was impossible last year. So you just had
Exactly.
to take your lumps or take the good score. I'd put him in that Dulcich group though, because he's not going to consistently score you big points. But he is a guy again at price. I kind of like him on my team.
Next up, it starts to get interesting. Dalton Kincaid.
Well, Dalton Kincaid is a guy that I would not overdraft, but I'm going to shock people because I'm taking at the dice and I'm rolling them on Kincaid. He's been coming in about 110 to 115 in the drafts. He's not really a tight end in this offense. He's more of the potential big slot guy. And I think that's going to pay off in the red zone. I think it's also going to take some of the heat off of Diggs in the red zone as well. I got Kincaid right in that Hawkinson tier. But
Ooh,
here's what I'll
spicy.
say. Yeah, so I'm really spicy on Kincaid, but I wouldn't draft him too early. Like 100, you get to about the 100th pick in the draft, and all I'm looking for is upside in best ball. And that's when I'll start looking to cash in on Kincaid. But in best ball only, in redraft, if I draft Kincaid, I better have another choice that is a
Yeah.
more of a sure bet at tight end. But I'm going to roll the dice on Kincaid because I don't see him as a true tight end. I don't see him playing true tight end reps all season. I see him as a slot guy.
George Kittle.
Kittle is in that same group with Hawkinson. He's just a touch below. And here's the thing, in best ball, I'm going to discount any concern over injuries with Kittle. I figure I'm going to get 6 to 10 great games out of Kittle at tight end. Now, the only concern is just like Debo's stats dropped when CMC came on board, Kittle's consistency at post in the big game seemed to drop a little bit when CMC came aboard, but I'd put him in that Hawkinson group, just one step below elite. And again, he's a guy that scores a little bit more if you're in a situation where it is a tight end premium best ball, because he will have those big 5 to 7 catch games. It's not just a tight end dependent guy.
Absolutely. Cole Kmet.
Cole Kmet is a mystery to me. How can this guy look so doggone good one week and then just not be in the passing game in the next week? I'd have him in that Dulcich group. I think there's great upside to Kmet. Right now, you're getting him 12th roundish in best ball. So that's a price that I'll take the chances on Komet. I think Fields will be better this year. I really do. And, usually young quarterbacks love to look for that tight end. And I think DJ Moore being on that team and a full year of Chase Claypool, a big body guy who can kind of take up some space in that red zone opens up the field a little bit for Komet as well.
Yep. Dawson Knox.
Dawson Knox is a guy that, despite me really loving Kincaid, I'm loving Knox at the price tag you're getting for him. 12th round for a red zone target guy. I kind of like him. I'd put him just in that Dulcich group. He's one of those guys that's going to give you some big weeks, and he's going to get lost. You're going to get a discount with Kincaid being on the team.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I don't exactly know what to make of this Buffalo tight end room, but for best ball, it's worth a shot. Sam Laporta, Detroit Lions.
Sam Laporta is a guy that is got a huge reward and a huge risk to him.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to equate this guy. But look at after the TJ Hawkinson trade, they were getting some big weeks out of tight ends that really were not great receiving options at tight ends.
Yeah.
So I'd put him in that Dulcich group. He's got a lot of risk to him, but you're getting a cheap price with Laporta. You're getting him late, late, late in drafts, and the upside is there on a good passing offense. The only thing I will say about Detroit and their entire fantasy football outlook for all Detroit players, that defense got a hell of a lot better in the offseason. If the defense plays better, they're not going to need to be playing from behind as much. So it might take a little bit of a bite out of the passing game.
I think he's going a little too high for me in rookie drafts, but best ball, it's a little more manageable. Michael Mayer, we have next.
Mayer is a guy that I just don't know what he's going to be year one. But in best ball, when I'm taking tight ends late, remember my strategy, I'm taking three of them. So if I take three guys and I bust on one, I still got two guys scoring for me. And the way I kind of look at this is if I take a high risk guy, so if I've already drafted a Kincaid or a Laporta on my team, for instance, and I'm going real late in the draft because Meyer's going to be another guy who's going to go really late in best ball drafts, I'm not going to take two of those risky guys. But I like him in that Dulcich group. Las Vegas uses the tight end in that offense. The Patriots system, if you will, uses tight ends heavily. And if that's the offense that we're going to be looking at, he's going to have all the opportunity in the world. But he's a rookie tight end, and we know what that means. But I'll take a shot at him at value in best ball. He's coming really cheap.
David Njoku.
David Njoku is just below the elite group for me, and it's more of a case of his price tag than anything else. You're getting him around the 8th round, sometimes even later than that in drafts. And this guy's got the upside to have some big games for you. He's not quite a Hawkinson or a Kittle, but he's got the potential to post you, 5, 6 really good games. And that's what I'm looking for with my tight ends in best ball. At his price, he would be a guy that I would take. And then I'd take a risky rookie, and then I'd take a cagey veteran. That would be kind of how I would make up my tight end group if I didn't get the elite guys.
I like that plan. That sounds like a good trio. Next up, we have Chigo Conquo.
Oh, this is a player I absolutely love in Dynasty. This is a kid that I was hot on as a rookie. I couldn't even believe that I was able to get him off waivers in a couple of Dynasty leagues early in the season. He got totally ignored, and I missed him in the rookie draft because he was a guy that I liked at the position. And then I saw him on the waiver wire. I'm going, idiot, grab this guy. But in best ball, he's a risky play. um, I'd have to put him in the Dulcich group here because I think he's got some upside potential and he's cheap. I mean, this is another guy you're getting 10th round and later, and he's a guy that I'll take at that price. He had a really solid floor. One of the ways I look at players, Aaron, is their 10-point floor, and he had one of the best 10-point floors of full games played in the league last year, and that was as a rookie. So that's why I got to put him in that middle group with Dulcich.
I owned a lot of shares of him as a rookie. I drafted him a lot in rookie drafts. I got him on waivers a lot. I love him at that price. His price is starting to get a little too high. I see him going now as tight end 9 and 10, and that's unless he really takes a huge step forward here, that's really capping the return on your investment. So I haven't been drafting him as much in a lot of the dynasty startups I'm doing right now, and I think I'm just holding the shares I currently have. Uh,
When I look at tight ends in best ball, I don't look so much at their rankings because tight end 5 to 22, they get pretty similar. So I'm looking more at where they're going total in the draft. And at 10th round, I'm taking a shot at a Concoy. But you're right. There might be some better guys or more steady guys that might be on the board because I'm not crazy about that offense.
Next up, Kyle Pitts.
Kyle Pitts is a guy that I have not been expecting to break out for the last couple of seasons. And I'm a little bit lower on Pitts than I am on some of these other guys. I'd put him in
Yeah.
the Dulcich group. Again, I'm
Ooh,
concerned about
wow.
the offense. Yeah, I'm going to put him down there because in best ball, I'm just a little concerned about what that Atlanta offense is going to look like. I think they're going to be so run heavy, and I think they're going to be so Drake London heavy when it comes to their passing game that Pitts is going to have some games that are good, but I think he's going to struggle to find a consistent upside. In best ball, this is a guy that if I could, I'd put him right between the two. He'd be like a 2.5 guy to me. It just on the edge. But again, his price is what downgrades him for me, Aaron, because whenever I'm
Yeah.
looking at a player, I look at it versus price. And that's why I've got him in that third tier because at his price, he is not a bargain.
It's definitely the lowest I've seen him ranked yet, but I can't argue it. Dalton Schultz.
Dalton Schultz is another guy I'm going to put right in that Dulcich group in the middle. Uh, I love the player. I'm not sure what the offense is going to look like in this year one, assuming the rookie is the guy. But I like the pedigree of the coach, the head coach. So I'm kind of thinking that we might see some pretty good tight end usage. And other than Mechie, who's coming back from serious illness, is there anybody on that Houston team that can catch the ball consistently?
Not really.
Probably not. So I
Not
like
really.
Schultz at his price tag about ninth. This is another guy where if I could get, let's say if I took Njoku and Schultz 8th and ninth rounds in a draft, I think that's realistic to get those guys there. And then I waited towards the end and got, a few rounds later, I got a Kincaid or a Laporta or a Meyer as a rookie. That's a draft I'm going to leave pretty happy with because I got two guys I know are going to be solid. And then I've got that risk but reward guy as my third tight end.
How about Irv Smith?
Irv Smith is a player I do not particularly like, but I love the team he's on. But I'd have him below that Dulcich group mainly because I just don't see how he's going to get consistent enough targets. I don't think he's as good of a player as Hayden Hurst, and Hurst was not a big player in best ball last year. He didn't give you a lot of scoring weeks.
And to close it out, Darren Waller.
Darren Waller is a player that I'm more up in the air about than anybody else. On his player ability, if you look at him in his prime a couple of years ago, this was a guy that was as good as anybody in the league, and that includes Travis Kelsey. His peak years were as good as Kelsey's peak years, which is almost sounds like blasphemy for a Kansas City Chiefs fan to say about a Raider player. But going to the Giants, you're looking at a lower volume. You're also looking at an aging player. It's going to be, he's a little overpriced for me right now. I don't expect huge things out of him. So I put him in that third group with the Dulcich group. And again, he gets a downgrade because he's pretty darn expensive. And I
Yeah.
don't look at anything in fantasy football on just a player by player value basis. It's always a player value versus ADP.
Judging from this, it looks like if you don't get a top 5 or 6 tight end, you're best off to just punt and own a bunch of them. We'll go tiers here. The elite tier, we have Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce. Great. We have Hawkinson, Kincaid, Kittle, and Njoku. The largest tier, good, which has probably half the players in it. We have Dulcich, Engram, Goddard, Juwan Johnson, Schultz, Fryermuth, Komet, Knox, Okonkwo, Laporta, Mayer, Pitts, and Waller. The average tier has Ertz, Gesicki, and Irv Smith, followed up by the below average tier being the 2 LA tight ends, Everett and Higbee. So basically, if you don't get the top 6, just punt because everybody else is in the same group. And they're all just touchdown dependent coin throws or coin flips.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I might take a Hayden Hurst late with Carolina. There's some interest there for me. And I'm also looking at Trey McBride from Arizona as a long last round draft pick. If I've only got 2 tight ends at that point, I'll punt with one of those guys like Trey McBride in the final round.
Absolutely. Well, Dennis, thank you very much for joining me. You want to take a second to tell everyone where they can find you and your work?
Find me over at DMike Media, and you'll see our podcast, The Science of Fantasy Football, over at scienceoffantasyfootball.com, along with all of the great data research from the professor, John Bush. We'll also be on For Frequency's Sake with our Data Lab podcast all year long as well.
Awesome. Well, this has been the My Tiers on the Best Ball Tight Ends with Dennis Michelson. Once again, I am Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and thank you again for tuning in to the Mad Science Lab podcast. Thanks one more time to Dennis for joining me, and thank you everyone for watching. Have a good day. Take care.